Okay, good morning. Thank you so much, Kristine, for taking the time out to speak with me about your film, Pray Away. And one of the things that really struck with me is we are in a time in our country where religion is very singular thought. In other words,
Mm,
you either believe that you only are allowed to believe this, there isn't much room for questioning, critique, or having dialogue. Did you find that when you were, kind of like witnessing everything and asking yourself, no one ever said why?
hmm. That is a great first question. The short answer is yes. I think that in our country, we sometimes confuse having a religious life or a spiritual life with believing every word from X leader in X community. And I think that to engage, whatever that means for you spiritually, has to include asking questions. And in the context of the ex-LGBTQ movement, I think there are really important questions that Christianity in our country, specifically in more conservative communities, need to ask, which is, why are the belief systems that we're putting forth that are causing harm, why are we saying that that's Christianity in its truest form? Why are we not fighting for the rights of all oppressed people, including LGBTQ people? Why are we saying in private that we support LGBTQ rights and dignity, that we don't support conversion therapy, but in public, we're not willing to say that? So absolutely, I think you just hit a nail on the head. I haven't been able to articulate myself. It's a great question. And I think that one message we want our film to give LGBTQ people who are in conversion therapy or in an ex-LGBTQ program, or ex-LGBTQ leaders who say that they themselves have changed, that are promising hope to others, but ultimately causing harm, is that you can have a spiritual life, and if it's important for you, a Christian spiritual life, where you can exercise your faith and exist in a church community that will fully accept you as you are. There are churches that will do that with you. There are communities that will accept you and love you exactly who as you are, who see Christianity and being LGBTQ as something that's not oppositional at all. So I hope that people take that away when they watch our film.
I'm glad you went down this road, because the thing that is missing is that people often think because you are a member of the LGBTQ plus community, therefore you don't love God, that you don't feel a connection to God. Uh, the thing is always somehow a punishment for being your true self. And I think it's hard, especially because there's a huge portion of LGBTQ plus people who grew up in the church, identify with the church, seek solace in prayer, but are hurting because they're never invited. Out of all the religions, I believe to this day, Judaism is the only religion that doesn't says you're going to go to hell for being a member of the LGBTQ plus. Talk about that struggle where you're like, these are my friends, these are my neighbors, but I can't communion with them because of me.
Great question. I'll say a few things. So first, let me start by saying that the reason I made Pray Away is because my uncle went through conversion therapy when he came out as trans as a child. And I was raised Catholic, and he was raised Catholic as well. And for him, he got that message from an actual licensed therapist and his religious community that being trans was something that is sick and sinful. And that combination of thinking psychologically that something's wrong with you, which I hope we all know, but just to say out loud, is something that is disproven, that is harmful, that is based on pseudopsychology, that is not true. And believing that your ability to have a relationship with a greater power is somehow impossible because of who you are as a person, that combination is so toxic. And I lived how harmful that was for him. He struggled with addiction. He struggled with depression. He struggled with anxiety. He had a really wonderful 10 years of sobriety where he was my babysitter and one of my best friends. And You know, I saw him in a really beautiful moment of his life, and I saw him struggle with suicidal ideations, with all these things. So I guess I just want to say first, I just want to acknowledge that what you're saying is so true, and I've lived it. So I also want to say I have hope that there are a growing number of churches and organizations that are seeing that to be a true, however you want to phrase it, a true expression of God's love, if you are a religious person or a person of faith, that there is a place for not even a place, that LGBTQ plus people are intrinsic to being a part of a community that celebrates love in its purest form. So there are communities that you can find where that exists. And I also want to say that for some people, your experience growing up as a person of faith and an LGBTQ plus person can get so entangled and complex and unhealthy that sometimes the healthiest thing to do is actually to find community, to find love, to find real therapy outside of that context. And that's okay too. So, you know, I'm answering your question from a few different angles. I think for me, the most important thing is that people do what they can to get out of harm's way, and that we as a community, you know, wherever you enter this community from, do all we can to reduce harm more structurally. So in terms of that bigger picture thing, that's what we hope Pray Away does, is really start a conversation to say, this is not a partisan issue. This is not are you a person of faith or not issue. This is an issue about reducing harm for children, and we can all get behind that. So that's what I have to say.
No, I think all the things you said are really important. Like for me, this film spoke because I have a sister who's gay, and conversations that I've had. And one of the reasons why church has not been a place of peace for me, because the people that were supposed to support her didn't. And I love my sister more than I do blind faith. So that is definitely something a lot of us had to struggle with, to let go of family members, to let go of certain places that we interacted, because it has hurt exactly what you said. The people that we love, the people we know that haven't harmed us, that have never done anything, and you are now telling us that this one thing makes them a threat to us, which I could never resolute. And to this day, I think I'm still going down this journey and trying to understand why this is such a thing that threatens people. And I think the other thing that I feel like it was really important that you showed without an agenda, right? You kind of like made us lean forward, which is, what are we saying to our kids? This is why I think your film is so important, because we are at this intersection of critical thinking, independent thinking, and being afraid to question authority, leaders, and what is right. And especially for younger people, this, you know, because heaven is such a strong visionary thing. There isn't a church that you can't go into where you don't have this dominant thing, and then you have the crucifix and all those things that used to scare me as a child. And to be told that you can't get near this thing because you're not like everyone else. And the crux in all of this is, we've had a lot of the people that are teaching us this, right, are themselves fighting within themselves to be their authentic self. So you have all of those things. But again, talk about how it is hard, like when you see certain things, right, and you kind of want to be like, stop, don't do this. But at the same time, you want the audience to learn and to push themselves to see something here is not right, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. And do you want us then to be like, why am I feeling uncomfortable about what I'm seeing? And what's causing this nausea feeling, for lack of a better word?
Wow. There's so much I want to speak to that's wrapped up in that question. Wow. That was very powerful. In terms of how we approach creating our film, we did not want to put religion on trial. We really wanted to speak plainly the truth of the harm of the ex-LGBTQ movement. So just to speak plainly, I urge anyone that hears, oh, there's a film about conversion therapy, who has some sensational film in their mind that's about to bash Christianity, I urge you to watch this film. It's coming out on Netflix in early August. We think in early August, definitely in August. I really urge you to watch this film. We did not create this film with some sort of underlying political agenda at all. We tried to speak the harm of this movement, speak truth to the harm of this movement. So that's one piece that I just want to say. Another piece of this puzzle that you mentioned is that a number of voices in our film are people who are former leaders of the movement who had claimed that they themselves had changed and taught others or professed to teach others how to do the same, to be able to teach others how to do the same. And a number of those leaders have since come out as queer in some way and are now speaking against the movement they helped start and grow. And we really wanted our film in part to be a study of what internalized homophobia and transphobia looks like wielded outwards. And the result is that it causes harm, of course. And that's something that we really explore in our film. There's also a voice of a survivor in the film who primarily experienced the conversion therapy movement as someone not in a position of leadership, though she does have an experience of what it means or feels like to have yourself be pushed into leadership, which is its own form of trauma. Most of the leaders in the conversion therapy movement are people who are survivors of conversion therapy themselves. It's a hurt people hurting other people thing. And then we also have a voice of someone currently in the movement who identifies as ex-trans, and we do really let him speak for himself. And so again, I really urge wide audiences to watch this film. Then the last thing I just want to say is that I just had a baby 2 months ago. Just what you were saying about what are we teaching our children gave me goosebumps, frankly. Because, there is nothing like having a child to make you want to make this world a softer, kinder place to land into. If my daughter happens to be LGBTQ plus in some way, queer in some way, I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that she does not get these messages from our culture, from any religion that she chooses to be a part of. It motivates you in a totally different way to make the world a better place than you found it. So I just wanted to say that, and that I just couldn't agree with you more about the impact of this on children.
No, I think it's important. I think also there is this ideology that you will live a lesser life if you lean in and embrace who you are. There is this ideology that you will not find community. Right now and the other thing I wanted to really hone down is I feel like we are also throwing out, not you and I, but a lot of people like to use ideologies and words in an improper way in order to make them less powerful. Like, not understanding the difference between homosexuality and being trans, what one has to do with sexuality, the other one with identity, not understanding, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, but not understanding what non-binary means. And instead of like making stuff up, asking and having the dialogue, you find a lot of that is because sometimes you watch certain things and you're like, I'm not exactly an expert, but I'm pretty sure that's not what it means. And I think, and again, when you blindly believe people and you're like, well, this person is a leader in this, and this person has this title, as you were saying with doctors, they wouldn't lie on TV. We get a lot of that, right? And do you feel like we need to do a better job of explaining what these different categories are? So when people do use them incorrectly or use them to cause harm, we can say, no, that's not correct.
I think the short answer is absolutely. And to relate it to something that I learned in making this film, there is a power when there is fear about a group of people, and there are stereotypes about a group of people based on misinformation, based on homophobia and transphobia. When you have that fear can get stoked by stories, inaccurate stories. And these stories are very powerful if they come out of the mouths of people who claim that they've changed themselves. And you can see how those stories get wielded to, for example, which we explore in our film and acknowledge in our film, to support anti-trans legislation that takes away the rights and dignity of trans people. And I guess I'm pausing because we know there's been an unprecedented number of laws passed in our country against trans individuals. And it is a shame that a part of the reason that is happening is because of a Christian voting bloc. And I think that's something that really needs to be reckoned with. So yes, I think that having deeper understanding of this terminology, and also just listening to people, truly listening to LGBTQ plus people who are saying, this is harming me, this is hurting me, this is not feel good, you know, really taking those stories seriously and really listening to the leadership in those communities is key, is absolutely key.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it does start at the school system, because when children that are 7 years old saying, I don't feel I belong in this group, right? And I think, again, this is where we get into terminologies where they're not talking about necessarily sexuality or something sexual. They're just saying, I may prefer playing with this group of people, or I'm more comfortable doing this activity. I know I'm a boy or I'm a girl, whatever you have there. I don't necessarily feel like I want to be in this group, right? And I think even in education, right? And it's supposed to be neutral, we're told. It's supposed to be welcoming. We're supposed to include parents and whatever else you have there. You have people making decisions at that early age, or when kids complain about bullying, right? It's gotten better, but we have a lot of work to do, where they're giving messages such as to little boys, man up. So you feel like it's not, I mean, yes, religion is a part of it, but it's also on how we view masculinity, femininity, how we are so prone to be dismissive. Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like people don't even, it's kind of like when people say to you as a woman, yes, that's horrible that happened to you, but that's just how they are. Where they think they're empathizing, but they're not. And do you feel like a lot of that is embedded in this? You know what I mean?
I do 100% know what you mean.
Don't care really. Do you know what I mean?
I do 100%. I think that's such a wise question and a set of observations. Something we say a lot about this film is that in the end, if homophobia and transphobia persist in our culture, period, you will see some version of the ex-LGBTQ movement manifest itself, because this is not a movement of a singular bad apple. One person who happens to wield their own personal trauma of being a survivor of conversion therapy or a victim of conversion therapy for some outwards. You know, if it were that simple, then the people in our film, when they defected, they would have ended the conversion therapy movement. What you're hitting on is that our culture more broadly has homophobia and transphobia in it, which is absolutely wrapped up in our ideas about gender roles and our ideas about, well, this is what a man does, and this is what a woman does, and this is what's okay for a man, and this is what is okay for a woman, is so wrapped up in the transphobic things and messages that we send to children. I'm thinking about an interview I read with a trans child on Monday, Trans Day of Remembrance, who said, you know, I never chose to be a girl. I just am a girl. I am. And I realized that on this day. And he talked about a teacher that didn't accept him. And I thought, oh, pardon me, that didn't accept her. And you see the power and trauma of that teacher's actions, you know? So I guess what I'm trying to say is this culture of transphobia and homophobia exists beyond, underneath, apart, in addition to what we see in Christian churches. And we all have to face that as a community, as a country, as a world. And that's something we really hope that our film also helps do.
We also are in a great time where I feel it's a step forward in this thing that we're discussing is we can now on social media, we go to events, right? And you can say what your pronouns are, right? And people always I think once again, they get so caught up in the why and what, instead of just go with it, because it's not about you. It's about, no, it's saying that you have to now go by they and them. You can still wear your she, he, and her, you know what I mean? And he, him, you know, you can wear that button and nobody will have a problem. But when a person then chooses they or them, don't dismiss that. You know what I mean? I think
absolutely
I think in that way we are making progress. We are taking strides to understand that there's not an either or, that there's a middle. And I would like
Absolutely.
to end things on a positive, because again, I do think that there is progress, you know what I mean? You look at my sister's generation, or even from the fact that kids can be out in high school, and a lot of them don't necessarily have that negative experience. And a lot of people come out and their parents is like, oh, I knew, I was just waiting on you. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that everything is doom and gloom. What do you want folks to say, you know, that are like, I want to help, to be a refuge? I want, how do I help people in the community that think that we're all against them, how to stay forward? Because I think part of that too is, I think a lot of good people do want to help. They just don't know where, and they don't know how, and they don't know how to start. And some of these people are in these communities, you know what I mean? They're just like, do I initiate it? Do I just say, you know, I'm here for you? Or how does that even begin? How do you answer that question?
Ooh, great question. I want to say one thing about the idea of hope before I talk about maybe the idea of like allyship. You know, what can people do who don't who aren't in an LGBTQ plus community? You know, what can they do? I just want to say, for anyone listening to this who is in an ex-LGBTQ program, who runs an ex-LGBTQ program, or just as part of some sort of community that does not accept you, there are communities, religious or not, that exist that will fully accept you and love you for who you are. And I think that people have a fear of leaving these things because they fear they will lose the people that love them. But I think in the end, love is not conditional. And that does not have to be a hopeless idea. I want to send out the message of hope. There are communities that will fully accept you. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, in terms of thinking more broadly about, you know, ex-churchgoer who says, I want to do the right thing, the good thing. What is that thing? We know that in the US alone, nearly 700,000 people have gone through some version of conversion therapy. And I bet you that every one of those people might say something a little different about what help looks like for them. So I think the most important thing to do is just start, whatever that means to you. Does that mean having a private conversation with your pastor, your kid's school, your family member that said this homophobic thing that you let slide? You know, does that mean participating in something on social media, going to a protest? Doesn't matter. Start. Because I think what people often do is fear saying the wrong thing and don't do anything. There are a lot of churches in our country who behind the scenes say they are against conversion therapy. Come forward and say you're against it. Come forward in whatever way it works for you. Come forward. What I think the how matters less than just doing it. And then I also, frankly, hope people watch our film. We're running a community outreach campaign where we're going to be bringing this film to churches, to religious organizations, to religious campuses, to schools. We have an incredible discussion guide that we're going to be making available. We have an impact producer who is a survivor of conversion therapy himself, who's going to be helping us bring this film around the country to those communities that need it. We would love for you to host a screening. If you don't know how to start, that's one way, not the only way, but it's one way. And you can find all that information on our film's website, www.prayawayfilm.com. But the most important thing is just to start.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for this film. I wish you amazing success. I hope and I pray, I know that seems odd, that it makes us all start questioning things that we feel uncomfortable with, that don't feel right to us. Your gut is there for a reason. Use it. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I'm not quite sure about this. And guess what? Other people are going to join you. And I think a lot of times we always wait on that one courageous person. And then you're like, okay, she did it. He did it. I'm going to join.
Exactly.
You. So I think your film is going to do that. It's going to help some people muster up some courage to help our LGBTQ plus people. And again, give the website one more time so people know where, you know, how they can support other than watching it on Netflix, and, you know, get the conversation going.
Definitely. www.prayawayfilm.com. We're also active on Instagram at prayawayfilm, Twitter, and Facebook. Please get in touch. Please get in touch with us. We have so many great partners also that are willing and able to help people in so many different ways. If you're an ally, if you're a survivor, if you need legal services, if you need mental health services, we have connections and abilities to handle all of that. So I really hope people get in touch. And I agree. I mean, it's simple but true. The change really starts with you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. This is an amazing conversation.
It's important. I just feel like right now we have an opportunity to choose to be